Egypt's Great Pyramid. The only survivor of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
The Great Pyramid wasn't just a building. It is where the king would have lived eternally.
Nothing on this scale had ever been built before.
It all started with the quest to make a gigantic pyramid that was perfect.
Exactly how a Bronze Age society managed to haul and fit together 2.5 million stone blocks is one of the world's greatest enigmas. Today, archaeologists may finally be able to solve this mystery, thanks to extraordinary new evidence.
We have found precious information, and it's just coming out of the sands.
An entombed ship being excavated right now at the foot of the pyramid.
These boats were made for the afterlife.
Are leading experts to investigate if ships and ancient waterways could actually have been the key to this desert build.
It's the infrastructure behind the construction of the pyramid that, for me, is fascinating.
Now this team is about to undertake a unique experiment to put these new theories to the test.
The block is shifted a little bit to the port side. This is not the best situation.
To see if they can finally unravel the secret of how the Great Pyramid was built and how Khufu's innovations transformed his country. The Great Pyramid Today, at the foot of the pyramid, a unique find is shining light on this theory.
This is #1 project, not only in Egypt, but in all over the world.
These pieces of wood are, in fact, a dismantled boat, a ceremonial ship that Khufu would command in the afterlife. It's a unique insight into the vessels used at the time. Esther Zidane oversees the excavation.
According to our analysis, this is the results. So we know this is the boat of King Khufu. I was very happy because I'm the first man to touch this wood more than 4,000 years.
Figuring out how this boat was built could help investigators understand the shipping technology that was used to transport stone from distant quarries to the pyramid's construction site. But time has taken its toll on the wood, and reassembling it is a challenge. Archaeologists, including Séverine Marchi, are unearthing fragments of vessels that were stored securely when not in use. They believe they were designed to transport stone.
Les bateaux étaient démontés, plusieurs fragments. Ensuite, ils étaient stockés dans la longueur de la galerie et la galerie était refermée avec ces blocs de fermeture pour être complètement protégée de la vue de l'extérieur, en fait. Donc vous pouvez voir ici une grande quantité de cordes qui étaient utilisées sur ces bateaux. La qualité de conservation est exceptionnelle. Vous voyez les cordes comme si nous venions de les préparer, de les faire ou de les abandonner.
Investigators working here want to know exactly how these boats were used for the pyramid build. And another find, unearthed just meters away, is proving to be one of the most crucial new pieces of evidence. Archaeologist Pierre Tallet has found an ancient scroll of papyrus.
Since the very day of the discovery, it was quite evident that we had the oldest papyrus ever found in the world. Came step by step, very, very small pieces at first, and on the very last week, very big rolls of papyri quite completely preserved.
It's taken Pierre 4 years of pain.
There is a lot of things to learn.
But most importantly, Mohammed can finally see what these cargo boats really looked like and the exact shape they took. Now he can draw up plans for his vessel. And his team can begin the build. They need to fit each of the planks together before starting the job of stitching them tight. Mohammed's designing this vessel to carry one average-sized casing stone, weighing 2.5 tons. But building boats was only part of the answer to finishing Khufu's pyramid. These vessels needed to get far closer to the construction site than the Nile would allow. The solution would involve another ambitious engineering project that would completely transform the landscape. New discoveries in Egypt are revealing how highly skilled shipping teams were the key to building the Great Pyramid.
Sophisticated blocks before transport to his boat. Otherwise, it will be a big problem for him.
The block passes inspection and is ready for shipping. But there's still a missing piece in the puzzle. For ships to be effective, they needed to get far closer to the pyramid than the Nile would allow. Now, in Wadi al-Jaf, Pierre Tallet is decoding the long-lost journal of sailor Mere to find out how the ancient Egyptians achieved this, construct his Great Pyramid. But the mighty Nile wasn't just vital for transport. Khufu also used it to get people to devote their lives to the construction of his tomb. The nation believed that their own god-king controlled the river's flow, and that pleasing him was essential to ensuring they had enough water. On an island in the Nile, Egyptologist Salima Ikram is investigating this link between the river and the pharaoh's power.
The Nile was key to Egyptian civilization. Without the Nile, Egypt wouldn't have existed.
This is a Nilometer.
I'm not sure if it will float or not. We have some water. Most of the water is coming from the middle part of the boat.
The ancient Egyptians knew that water would initially seep into these stitched-together boats. But this would make the joints swell. And Mohammed's boat is slowly becoming watertight.
This is a very important phase for the waterproofing. Also, it helps with the lashing because the ropes will be tensed and will bring all the planks together.
It's a successful launch. But can the boat hold the weight of a heavy stone block? Pyramid construction would grind to a standstill if rocks were delivered late. So sailors like Mera had to work to an exacting timetable. In Wadi al-Jaf,
This Inspector Mera is the chief of a small group of about 40 persons. It is only a section of a big team. But the organization of work that we can see here is exactly the same as for building of the Great Pyramid of Khufu.
the papyrus shows that Khufu divided his workers into teams with clear responsibilities and targets. A crew of 40 men, like Mera led, was known as a file. 4 files formed a gang of 160 elite laborers. And it took many of these gangs to make up a huge workforce, thousands strong. Khufu didn't have general laborers. He had focused elite squads.
There is a very precise division of the work. I think everything is perfectly planned and everything is perfectly calculated for the pyramid building.
Pierre's team is investigating another discovery unearthed at Wadi al-Jarf. These water jars reveal how each file was given its own clear identity as motivation.
Most of this pottery was inscribed with formula giving the name of the team that were supposed to use them.
These pots reveal that Mera's file was called the Followers of the Boat, named after the snake on its figurehead.
Those fragments are naming the team of Meher, and we can even imagine that Meher himself could have handled the jar.
Pierre's crew is uncovering team names on hundreds of objects found right across the site. They've discovered the identities of 6 separate boat crews so far. By giving each file a clear identity, Khufu may have deliberately fostered a sense of pride and competition among his workers. They check the hull for leaks.
It's looking good.
Mohammed's team discovers that boats, stitched together with nothing more than rope, really can cope with heavy loads. Now, they'll attempt to sail the vessel across the mighty Nile. The limestone block will make it difficult to both propel and to steer. But Mera's papyrus reveals the best way to do it. He writes that the quarries were upstream from the pyramid. This meant that when the boat was fully loaded, his team could paddle quickly with the current. Then they used regular northerly winds to sail their empty boat back against the flow. Mohammed's crew will try to maneuver their cargo straight across the Nile. That's far shorter than Mera's regular run.
It seems difficult for them to row. We have a problem from some waves. Port side is lower in the water than starboard.
The rocking of the boat is causing the limestone to slip.
The block is shifted a little bit to the port side. That's why we have this tilting in the boat. This is not the best situation.
If the rock keeps sliding, the boat could capsize. They need to get control. Heading straight across the Nile is only making it worse. So they decide to row with the current and head downstream, just like Mera. Rudders at the stern angled the vessel towards the opposite shore.
The rowers are having fun on the boat. It's a new experience for them.
Finally, they approach safe harbor. it's clear how skillful the ancient Egyptians must have been to transport 70 tons of stone at a time.
I think Mera would be proud with the accomplishment of his work. He was doing something for the king, which is very important for them at this time. This job is not easy. We have to admit it now.
Adal's team will take over from here. They'll investigate how workers hauled these stones from the water right up to the pyramid face, using manpower alone. When they delivered their heavy cargo to the pyramid site, Mera and his team would overnight here. Khufu needed to look after his workforce to keep them healthy and motivated. And archaeologist Mark Lehner thinks that housing them by the port played a role. Here he's uncovered the ruins of a whole lost town.
Are we on the spot where Mera and his men stayed overnight? We put a grid over the whole place in order to map it. And then we can decide where to excavate down to the floor level, to the houses and places where they lived.
New walls were built to protect the original ruins, and these now reveal how buildings were laid out. Mark thinks this one is a style appropriate for a team leader like Mera.
You come into the main living room. Now, opening off this same central room, you also have, in effect, his bedroom. This is a rather substantial sleeping platform, as we call them, and so it's just about the right length, you know, see, for official of moderate height, like myself, to stretch out.
But houses like this were too grand for the workers that Mera commanded.
Around each of these house compounds, I expected to find smaller houses of the dependents. Well, we found some of that, but in the center of the site, we found something very different.
Mark has unearthed the outline of a building that is 35 meters long. It's the perfect size to sleep 40 people. The number of workers that Mera's journal suggests he's likely to have had in his team. The thick walls supported arches and a flat roof. Laid side by side, these barrack blocks were an efficient way of housing a huge workforce. The structure Mark's found here was used just after Mera's time. But he thinks his team was put up in similar, vast modern blocks, just like this.
This would have been occupation of a density unseen anywhere else in Egypt, in any village or town site of that time.
Providing adequate accommodation was only part of Khufu's problem. Investigators want to find out how he fed the thousands of hungry laborers working here. Archaeologist Claire Mallison is looking for clues.
These are samples of ash from within one of the houses of the town, and the plants are preserved when they're charred, and we can identify what plant it is just by the shape. Wheat is the most important crop for making bread. To feed just the individuals staying in the barracks area, it would need over 200 loaves of bread a day.
This was food production on an industrial scale, and Claire has found the proof.
So we've got various different sizes of bread mould. The mould itself weighs about 7 kilos. So you imagine this full of bread as well. It was pretty hefty. And we have hundreds of these, hundreds and thousands and tons of fragments of them. People talk about how the pyramid was physically constructed. It's the infrastructure behind how that was done that, for me, is much more fascinating.
Pyramid building was starting to transform Egypt. A vast and efficient way to feed and house people was being developed. But things weren't just changing at home. Archaeologists are beginning to discover how Khufu's great build had consequences far beyond his own nation. In Egypt, investigators are discovering that shipping was vital for transporting stone that originally encased the Great Pyramid, giving it a brilliant white finish. Now, new excavations are exposing just how far afield these boats needed to travel to achieve Khufu's dream. At the ancient port of Wadi al-Jarf, Pierre Tallet's team has made an important discovery.
The workers have just found a tool which seems to be very well preserved inside one of the galleries. I've not seen it myself, and it's just coming out of the sands. It has really the shape of a blade. Seems like a dagger, in fact, a small kind of a dagger. It's a little bit broken. I don't think it's complete.
The blade is complete, but the other part is broken.
It's not very expected to find this kind of copper knife, in fact, in this area right now. Copper is not so frequent because it's very precious.
Builders needed copper chisels so they could cut and shape pyramid stones with mathematical precision. But the ancient Egyptians had a problem. Mines near the monument couldn't produce the huge quantities needed. So workers had to look further afield. Pierre has discovered the place where he believes the builders headed to solve this problem.
We are going to the seaside of this place of the Suez Gulf on the Red Sea, and we made an incredible discovery there.
3 miles from Pierre's main excavation, he's unearthed another significant find: the ruins of a lost ancient jetty.
These blocks are part of this jetty. It has been very well done because it actually was strong enough to last at least 4 million from the time of the construction. It's also possible to distinguish the underwater part of the jetty if you are looking closely to the sea.
Pierre's team has mapped out the jetty at low tide to reveal that it stretches 200 meters out to sea in an L shape.
At the bottom of the harbor itself, we also find about 25 anchors that were left. So we have the most ancient artificial harbor ever found in the world.
This harbor was built to be big enough to protect a large fleet of cargo boats that would sail to the Sinai Peninsula.
The bigger mines for copper that Egyptians could use at that time were in Sinai. This harbor was probably exclusively to get copper for the tools for making the pyramid itself.
Without this harbor, Khufu's dream could never have been achieved. And Meres papyrus reveals just how extensive Khufu's shipping routes needed to be. Decoding the hieroglyphs shows that copper imports were just the tip of the iceberg. Building the pyramid was such big business that a vast transport network was needed to funnel commodities to the monument. The project was a truly international affair. Food for the workers was farmed in the Nile Delta. Wood for shipbuilding came from Lebanon, 400 miles to the north. Limestone for the pyramid's casing came from Tura, and granite for its internal chambers from Aswan, far to the south.
We have here an idea of the importance of the state at that time, organizing very, very carefully all the raw material for the workers. All the country was working for the project of the building of this great pyramid of Khufu.
But it wasn't just Khufu and his pyramid that would benefit from this massive new infrastructure. This huge construction project was transforming the nation through the movement of goods and people on an unprecedented scale. Archaeologist Mark Lehner is overlooking the area where many of these materials and products arrived.
It was a teeming bustling, busy port. Through this water transport infrastructure came people from all over Egypt.
It's at this port that Mera would have docked with his limestone blocks.
The most forgiving place offered by the Giza Plateau to Mera and his men for offloading their stone and getting it up to the Khufu pyramid would have been the area now just out in front of the Sphinx. There's a natural ramping up. In fact, the modern road from the Sphinx to the Khufu pyramid follows that very incline.
Mark has identified the route. But how were heavy stones hauled half a mile uphill through manpower alone? Near the pyramid, archaeologist at Al-Kalaini has assembled a team of 40 men. He wants to see how thousands of giant stones were transported their final few hundred meters.
Now the workmen are preparing for putting the stone on the sledge. They have to be very careful with this step because the stone is really very heavy.
Recent excavations prove that the blocks weren't simply dragged across the sand by sheer force. The Egyptians used a clever system of rails and possibly rollers as well.
You can listen for the sound of the workmen, actually. It shows that they are very happy and working very, very fast for transporting these blocks.
Once they get going, it's surprising just how much speed they can reach with such a heavy stone. The Egyptians had an innate understanding of force, acceleration, and momentum. When the blocks arrived at the pyramid face, they had to be perfectly shaped to fit the sloping sides of the tomb. This was a job for trigonometry, not trial and error.
The ancient Egyptians are very clever with mathematics, including, the angles that they used for this kind of large buildings.
Ancient engineers figured out that they only needed to take two measurements: a horizontal distance of 11 units and a vertical distance of 14 units. Joining them gives the pyramid its perfect slope, an angle of 51.8 degrees.
It was actually surprising for me because to making this shape, it was taking more than 3 hours. It's take more time, actually, more than, splitting the stone from the quarries.
These bright white stones were the final chapter in the story of building the Great Pyramid. It brought life-changing innovations. A massive network of waterways and an artificial port revolutionized Egypt's transport system. And a sophisticated new city enabled a workforce to be organized and cared for on a whole new scale.
Once they had put all these systems and all this infrastructure in place, there was no going back. They became more important than the pyramid itself, and set Egyptian civilization off on a course for the next 2 or 3 millennium.
Khufu's workers believed this giant project would reap rewards in the afterlife. But their real success was in helping to create a modern and powerful nation.
At 9 o'clock tomorrow night, Morpho tries to solve an ancient mystery. Why has no evidence of the existence of the Garden of Babylon ever been found? Look into the future here on Channel 4 Next tonight, and it's not that bright. Earth has been destroyed, but did anyone tell the old lady who's trying to find it? Electric Dreams, Impossible Planet, coming up.